Hello Raptors fans and welcome back to Raptors Report. Today we are going to be discussing the Toronto Raptors game against the LA Clippers, which unfortunately for me and anybody who watched it began at 10:30 at night and ended at 1:10 in the morning. So if there are big bags under my eyes, I mean bigger than usual, that's why. But I'm excited to talk about the game because there's a bunch of stories that emerged and a lot of very exciting things that happened during the game, not the least of which was the return of Immanuel Quickley. And his return kind of got the gears turning in my brain. I am going to use this return to talk about what I have seen from the NBA over the past couple of decades and the change in how point guards operate within the NBA. Because I think there's something very interesting going on. And there's something that I see from him as a player and as an archetype that is starting to become more common in the NBA and why I think it can work for the Toronto Raptors. So let's begin with my observations of Immanuel Quickley as a player. And I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of NBA generalists because I like to get the outside view of the team. And one of the refrains that I heard quite a bit was that Immanuel Quickley is a sixth man. And I mean, he was a sixth man for the New York Knicks. But in terms of what people are talking about when they mention what a sixth man is, it means a player who is a scoring guard. So there is a spectrum when it comes to guards of what their role is, what their mentality is, and how they contribute to a team. On one side, you have the pure point guards. Steve Nash is obviously an example of a pure point guard where he was extremely talented at setting his teammates up. He led the league in assists for a bunch of seasons. Very talented playmaker, but he was also a talented scorer and shooter, and he could generate shots for himself. One of the most pure of pure point guards was none other than Jose Calderon, who played for the Toronto Raptors about a decade ago. He was kind of a beloved Toronto Raptors fixture, played with Chris Bosh. He was so far towards pure point guard that I struggle to think of a player that embodied that as much as he did. And that's not necessarily a compliment because I don't think that it means that you're doing the best job being a point guard. What it means is that his assist to shot attempt ratio was very skewed towards assists, meaning that he was not looking for his shot most of the time. He almost averaged a double-double in terms of points and assists, but it was almost equal in terms of the points and assists. Very little gap between that. He averaged more points than assists, but the gap was quite small. That is kind of a dying breed within the NBA. You don't really see that as much anymore. And I think that one of the main reasons for that was the emergence of LeBron James as a player that kind of reimagined what the ideal player was. LeBron James, of course, is the best player of all time, or second best, depending on how you view things. He is an extremely skilled NBA player, and also an amazing playmaker with the body of a power forward. And for the majority of his career, he was essentially the de facto point guard. He would use screens, he would use isolation to create open looks for his teammates. One of the things that LeBron James needed were players that could hit open shots, could run off of screens, create space for him off of the ball, and play finishers around the rim who could clean up misses, be lob threats for him, set screens, do all of that kind of stuff. So he was essentially the point guard. Another player that rethought and was very fundamental in shifting the power balance in the NBA was Draymond Green. Draymond Green was another forward-sized player that was essentially the Warriors' main playmaker. Those two players won many, many championships between the two of them. What I see from that, the fallout from that, is that playmaking, the ability to run an offense, has been taken from the point guard, which was the de facto position that ran the offense, and distributed it around the lineup. And I think that that's part of the reason that there has been an offensive explosion within the NBA, is that having more playmaking at the forward spots and at the center spot has unlocked guards to be more than just guys that set other teammates up. They have become some of the best scorers in the NBA. When you get the other players moving the ball, touching the ball, setting guys up, you can have guard players B scorers. The big man and larger players who generally lack the hard skills, so ball handling, three-point shooting. Those are things that get rarer and rarer as you move up the height chart, which is why guys like Porzingis and even, Evan Turner, those guys are kind of unicorns because they are very tall and they have a really outstanding three-point shot. But those guys are rare. And in order to make those players useful on offense, and you're starting to see it this year with Jakob Poeltl, is by putting the ball into their hands and allowing them to help orchestrate the offense. So if they have another skill, which is essentially just knowing how to play the game, then you can allow the guards to do what they do best, which is shoot the ball, dribble, get past players, use explosiveness to get into the lane, make easy passes, rather than having them dominate the ball for the entire possession. Now, you are starting to see an emergence of scoring guards as players who you actively want on your team, not just in a sixth-man role, but as a starter. A scoring guard off of the bench has been one of the staples for the NBA for a very, very long time. Vinny the Microwave Johnson, that guy is a legend of sixth men. Jamal Crawford, Lou Williams, those types of players, scoring guards, have traditionally been seen as sixth men because you don't have to have a guy who is looking to set up their teammates in that role. You want them to come off the bench trying to score, keep your team afloat on the offensive end while the starters rest. You can give them a ton of shots. And that's still true to an extent. But with the emergence of playmaking throughout the lineup, those are types of players that you can start to put into your starting lineup. And when you look at how the Raptors are constructed, having an Immanuel Quickley, especially when you watched him last game, that guy can generate shots for himself. That guy can come off of screens and shoot. That guy can be a play finisher, get into the lane, finish with layups and whatnot. And that is all being facilitated by other guys at the bigger spots. RJ Barrett, as I've mentioned, is kind of like a point guard for the Toronto Raptors. Jakob Poeltl has been instrumental at handling the ball, setting screens, dribble handoffs. They are giving a lot of playmaking duties to Jakob Poeltl. And then, of course, elephant in the room, burying the lead, who is injured right now? Scottie Barnes. Scottie Barnes is one of the best playmaking forwards in the entire league. So all of the playmaking between Jakob Poeltl, RJ Barrett, and Scottie Barnes, those are guys that are going to be able to make the offense flow. What do you need to add to that in order to make your offense pop? A scorer, a three-level scorer, a player that can shoot the ball, a player that can get inside and finish with floaters, the guy who is going to finish your play, a guy who can create offense for themselves. That fits perfectly with what the rest of the team is trying to do on offense, which is to create advantages, use screens, make plays for other players. Having a player who is more focused on their own scoring, they will be rewarded for doing so inside of the framework of Darko's offensive scheme. So I see the potential here, and I think that last night was a very good example of what Immanuel Quickley can bring to the table. So let's talk about the game. The game was another close loss. It was another very entertaining game. Of course, in the moment, I heard a lot of people talking about after the game, oh, this is perfect. The Toronto Raptors are in every game and they're losing it, so we're getting closer to flag territory. Capture the flag. Cooper flag, the ultimate prize at the end of the season for tanking teams. And I get where they're coming from. And in my brain, I know that that is a worthwhile cause, getting that top-end talent at the top of this loaded draft coming up. In my heart, it saddens me to see a team every night give it their all, have a really good game from an execution standpoint and nailing all of the things that they should be doing, very good individual performances, and then just to come up short at the end. And I'm not saying that I want them to win all of these games. I mean, I'd be cheering for them to do that in the moment. I understand the ultimate goal, but you gotta give them some wins. I want to see the execution lead to results for these guys. I don't want it to be this futile effort of rolling a ball up to the top of the mountain and not being able to get it down the other side. It's very frustrating at the end of games and there's some blame to go to Darko here, because I feel like he has kind of failed the Raptors from an execution standpoint, a coaching execution standpoint, with some questionable decision-making. Not the least of which is putting Jakob Poeltl, who has improved his free throw shooting, but is still not a guy I would trust to have on the floor during crunch time, and certainly not a player that I would trust to put the ball into the hands of when you are running a quick hit trying to go for a 3-point play at the end of the game. That's just that doesn't make any sense. Of course, you want to set a screen to free a shooter, and he's very good at that, but you have to scheme and come up with another way of creating separation to get the shot you want. I think that Jakob Poeltl almost kind of turned water into wine at the end of the game when he was fouled, sent to the free throw line. He made the first free throw and then got his own rebound off the miss and got another 2-point shot attempt on the rim, which would have scored and tied the game. I think that's a commendable effort from him, but he shouldn't be on the floor doing that in the first place. It's kind of foolhardy, and he did a good job of trying to salvage that situation, but it's not up to him. He should not be on the floor in that situation. So Darko, he's learning on the job right now, and hopefully he's taking lessons away from this. It's another concerning thing that I am starting to see with Darko. The in-game management has been lacking over the past couple of games. Of course, I am very encouraged by how the players are playing, and you have to give him credit for creating the framework and coaching guys up and getting squeezing the best performances out of his top players. But in-game management is concerning, and you have to point it out when it's as glaring as that. However, it was an exciting game, and I'm glad I stayed up until 1:10 in the morning to watch it. And unfortunately, got the heart rate going, didn't really fall asleep until 1:30 or something like that. So apologies if my thoughts are a little scrambled right now. But let's get into the individual performances. We will start with Immanuel Quickley. One of the things that I love from him are the pull-up threes. That is something that has been direly missing from the Toronto Raptors. And in the NBA, almost all of the top offenses in the league have a pull-up 3-point threat. A guy who can come off of screens, and if you go under it, or you're a little late, or the screen is good enough and you can't get to that player, they are pulling up and shooting a high accuracy 3-point shot. And he is very good at that. He shot 3 of 8 from 3-point range, which is good. He was 8 for 18 from the field, 21 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal, and only 1 turnover. I thought it was a very impressive return. Of course, he hit the clutch 3-point shot to tie the game and was clearly fouled on a drive to the rim by Terrence Mann. It should have been called, especially what they were calling on the other end on Powell and on James Harden. It was just an egregious oversight. I think there were a lot of reffing mistakes this game. A huge point of frustration for me is the unevenness of the calls. And of course, the Toronto Raptors foul. That's not a surprise. They're a young team. But when the whistle is one way on one end and another way on the other end, it's hard to overlook. But we'll shelve that again. We'll talk about Immanuel Quickley. I think he also did a pretty good job on defense. They were switching a lot of stuff, but he was one of the main covers on James Harden, who did not have a very good shooting night. James Harden scored exactly half of his points at the line. He was 5 of 17 from the field, 12 of 13 from the line, so not a very efficient night from James Harden. I think Immanuel Quickley did a good job when he was tasked with guarding Harden, but as I mentioned, there were a ton of switches, so they were switching almost everything on pick and rolls. I think that the team did a good job as a whole, guarding players on the perimeter. I think it was a positive game in that aspect. And on offense, Immanuel Quickley is going to give the team a spark with his shooting, his ability to make floaters once he gets a strong screen and can enter the lane. He can attack closeouts. I think he brings a lot to the table for the Toronto Raptors. Last night was a very good performance from him, a very good starting point as he comes back from injury. So very pleased with the performance that I saw from Immanuel Quickley. I think that he can do his thing, and the Raptors will be a better team for it. Next up, we will talk about Grady Dick. I think Grady Dick had a very strong first half, and I don't want to say cooled off in the second half, because they were doing a ton of stuff to stop Grady Dick from even touching the ball. They were making sacrifices in their defensive schemes in order to keep Grady Dick from really even getting a touch. And Derek Jones Jr., very talented defender. He is very long, has very quick feet. He can move, he can guard, he's strong. And what he was doing for Grady Dick was face guarding him a large percent of the time. What that means is simply ignoring everything else on the floor, only paying attention to Grady Dick and chasing him around the court constantly. And even in spite of that, Grady Dick managed to have 15 points on the game, most of them coming in the first half. Even with that defensive attention, it's not as if the Clippers got burned and they were like, okay, we need to change how we're guarding this guy. No, from the jump, from the tip, the scouting report was to keep Grady Dick from getting the ball, keep him from scoring. When you have a full roster and when you have a full team, there are so many knock-on effects from having a guy who demands the attention that Grady Dick does, that if you leave him for a second, he is popping a highly accurate three-point shot in your face. If he catches the ball in the perimeter, you've got to close out. If you don't close out, he is shooting that shot. And if you do close out, the man has been on another level this season in terms of attacking closeouts, getting to his favorite spot, the baseline, and hitting a pull-up jump shot, or coming off of that screen, getting the ball and then hitting a mid-range shot. His mid-range shot has been deadly accurate. So he has a scoring package that is extremely hard to shut down if he gets the ball. And that is why they were trying so hard to prevent him from even catching it. That is going to pay dividends for the rest of the team. Everything is going to be so much more open. Everything is going to be so much more free and easy for those players. The paint is going to be way less packed. Teams are going to be game planning around stopping him, so you are not going to get as much defensive attention. That is kind of why Grady Dick, even when he's not touching the ball, if you have a bunch of other players that are touching the ball and want to score, having a guy that is able to do that is going to make your offense pop. It is going to make your team so much more deadly on offense, having a guy like Grady Dick out there. So very pleased with what I saw from him, even if he didn't have a big game in the second half. On defense, I thought he did an okay job, actually. Not a ton of defensive breakdowns. The switching scheme that they were using, the Clippers were trying to abuse it by putting Norman Powell or James Harden onto Grady Dick, but it wasn't like Grady Dick was shutting them down or anything, but they were not hemorrhaging points when the Clippers were isolating against him. And I think his isolation defense, as long as that is okay, then you can get away with that kind of switching. The problem that I've seen with him generally has not been on switches where he is matched up one-on-one. It is when he has to go over the screen. That has been his Achilles heel, when he has to navigate screens. He's not very good at that yet, but in isolation, he's okay, and they did an okay job last night with those switches. Next up, we'll talk about RJ Barrett. And talking about scheming to shut down a guy, he is in the scouting report now. The teams know this is the guy that stirs the drink for the Toronto Raptors. He is the point guard. He is the guy that you have to stop in order to stop the Toronto Raptors. He came off of the bench, but Chris Dunn was the guy that they had guarding RJ Barrett for a large portion of the game. Chris Dunn is a very good defender. He is large, long arms, very quick feet. And then Ivica Zubac is a very good rim protecting center. So tough combination to attack. Even when you're getting good screens and you're getting into the paint, there's a very large, intimidating center waiting at the rim. And RJ Barrett has started to struggle when he is the number one focal point of a defense. He finished the game with 13 points on 15 shots. He was 1 of 3 from three-point range. He missed both of his free throws, which is a concern. He had 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, a block, and 4 turnovers. So I would say a poor evening for RJ Barrett. And I understand that there will be a learning curve coming back and having to share the ball a little bit with Immanuel Quickley, but the scouting report on RJ Barrett has become very clear. You want to cut off his left hand and guide him into the help defense. And when you have a good help defender like Ivica Zubac, it's going to be tough around the rim. So that kind of explains his lackluster evening. I think he can bounce back from it. I'm not going to be too concerned. I am very pleased with his development as an on-ball creator. I think that the Clippers have a pretty strong defensive core. They picked up a lot of strong free agents who can guard. Of course, I'm not throwing in the towel on RJ Barrett. I think that he can do a good job, and I think he has been doing a good job for most of the games that he's played for the Raptors this season. He's on a bit of a cold stretch now that he is in the crosshairs of the other team's scouting report. I would say that he is the number one guy that teams are trying to shut down. Next up, we will talk Ochai Agbaji. Ochai Agbaji continues to be an extremely good role player for the Raptors. I would say he was probably the Toronto Raptors' best player last night. He was their leading scorer. He tied, obviously, with Immanuel Quickley. He was very efficient, 9 for 14 from the field, 3 of 6 from three-point range. He continues to be a corner assassin. Not many above the break threes last night. Immanuel Quickley, being a guy who can pop shots from above the break, he can occupy the corner, and he is great from that range. He had 7 rebounds, a couple of offensive rebounds, very nice to see from him. 3 assists, 2 steals, 0 turnovers, and good defense. Whenever he gets an opportunity to guard guys, it's not going to be easy. I'm not saying he's shutting guys down, but he moves his feet. He gets between players in the basket. He makes it tough. You have to shoot over him. I'm not going to say he is at the level of some of the top perimeter defenders in the NBA. I don't think he's there yet, but he is solid and he is doing a good job on that end. He contributes in so many different aspects. He is a deadly three-point shooter from the corner. He is cutting to the basket. He's a ball hawk. He can come and disrupt plays. He's doing so much for the Toronto Raptors. He is one of the main driving forces for the Toronto Raptors being in all of these games. He's giving you quality minutes. If the Raptors could lock this guy up long-term, I would love it. I'm loving what I'm seeing from Ochai Agbaji, and it's not like he's doing stuff that is unfeasible for him to continue to do. He's always been a pretty good three-point shooter from the corner. He's always been a pretty good defender. And what you're seeing, these mental leaps that he's making, that's not smoke. He is figuring the game out in real time. He is realizing what he can do off of the ball in order to help the team win. And even on the ball, being able to not just be a catch and shoot guy or a play finisher, but being able to handle the ball a little bit, that is very important. You become a more three-dimensional player when you can handle the ball a little bit, like Ochai Agbaji. We are seeing growth in every direction, and I am starting to get kind of excited. I'm getting a little chills right now watching Ochai Agbaji play. And last but not least, last but not great, let's put it that way, Jakob Poeltl. Jakob Poeltl is doing the stuff that helps teams win, rebounding, blocking shots, clearing the paint, setting screens, doing all that kind of stuff. But then on offense, if you have a game like Jakob Poeltl had last night, you're sort of undoing all of the other stuff that you do that is positive that the Raptors need. You're kind of dragging the team down with your offensive effort. He had 5 points on 1 of 6 shooting, missed a ton of gimmies around the rim, and he was 3 of 6 from the line, so not great there. Let's say 3 for 5 because he intentionally missed the last free throw that he took, so I won't ding him for that. But he also had 4 turnovers as well, kind of sloppy with the ball. It seems like he had curtailed the turnover problem that he had earlier in the season for that nice stretch of games that he had. But then this game was kind of a return to what was plaguing him earlier. Getting the ball up in transition, he has brain farts where he just simply throws the ball to the other team or makes a risky pass when he doesn't need to. And that led to just a very easy turnover. It looked like he passed it to Ivica Zubac. So not a good game from Jakob Poeltl. Unfortunate because, he has been a very solid player for the Raptors this season. So let's move to the bench. And we'll start with the biggest surprise here because we got to talk about it. Bruno Fernando. Wow. What a game from Bruno Fernando. They brought him off the bench in the second half. People were saying, okay, well, the Raptors are waving the white flag. They are tanking for Cooper flag. Bruno Fernando, what's he doing in this game? God, he had a great game. He played good defense. He had 3 assists, some very nice bounce passes, cutting to the rim. I believe he set up Immanuel Quickley with a bounce pass for an easy layup. He had a sick dunk. He had a block. He had 2 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 points on 2 of 3 shooting. He looked great. If he had been doing this from the beginning of the season, I'd be singing his praises. Of course, he wasn't very good at the beginning of the season, but you have to give a man credit when he does what he is supposed to do and has a great game. So if he can keep it up, I'll reverse course. I'll sign the Bruno Fernando apology form. I'll do whatever it takes to get back into his good graces, because that was impressive last night. I don't know if you can expect that every night, but good for him. Chris Boucher had a good game. 14 points, 6 of 12 shooting, 6 rebounds, a steal. He played a huge stretch of minutes for the Raptors in the second half. And of course, Chris Boucher giveth, Chris Boucher taketh away. He makes mistakes. He does weird stuff, and he shoots shots he shouldn't, and blah, 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 whatever. He's one of the main scorers off of the bench. He does the thing that he is known for, which is getting offensive rebounds, making hustle plays. He missed all of his threes last night, but, you know, he made up for it in other ways. There's a lot of slander for Chris Boucher because you could argue that he doesn't play the right way. I would argue that he is playing kind of the 6th man role for the Toronto Raptors, which is to score and keep your team afloat. I think he does that pretty well. I think he's a strong bench player. He has up and down games. Last night he was on. He had a good game. This is kind of what he does. This is how he plays, and he gives the team a lift in certain games like this one. Next up, Jamison Battle. Jamison Battle has a tough time hitting higher degree of difficulty 3-point shots. So he is not a guy that you want necessarily running off of screens and popping shots. And I feel like now that he is in the scouting report, he is one of the main bench players on the Toronto Raptors. Other teams are just not going to leave him open. And he has some playmaking chops, can pass the ball. He had a nice assist, I believe it was to Jakob Poeltl last night. And, you know, he can contribute in other areas, but when it comes to specialists, everybody wants to hype up specialists for the things that they can do other than the skill that they are known for. But at the end of the day, if you are a specialist, you got to do the thing that you're being paid for, that you're on the team for, which is to hit shots. And he was 1 for 5 from 3 last night, so you don't get a passing grade for that. Unfortunately, that's why you're on the floor. Those are the types of shots that you need to make in order to be a good role player. That's the long and short of it. Davion Mitchell had a mixed bag. It seems like Davion Mitchell has mixed bags and good games, and last night was a mixed bag. He was good on defense. He was playing hard. He did not hit his shots, and he kind of got a little carried away. I think, of course, being demoted to the bench can probably sting a little bit. Maybe you are looking for your shot a little bit more so you can do the 6th man thing. I don't think that suits him. That's not something I want to see from him. The guy should be playing a less loud role on offense. And he was doing what he was supposed to be doing, which is catch and shoot, but he was also just dominating the ball a little bit too much and missing easy passes. So on offense, he didn't have a very good night. On defense, he did have a good night. I think he did a good job on James Harden. I think that he did a good job on Norm Powell. I think that he is a good defensive player, but it was pretty evident that he just did not have it going on the offensive end. So, you know, unfortunate. Jonathan Mogbo and Jamal Shed did not really play very many minutes last night. Of course, when Immanuel Quickley is back in the lineup, there's going to be less time for other players. Everybody's minutes are going to be scaled down a little bit. And of course, when you have Bruno Fernando playing really well, you can't pull him. Mogbo's minutes are going to go down. So their roles were reduced, and you can't really ding them too hard for not being big contributors when their minutes are low. So that kind of wraps things up. That's what I saw from the players that played in the game. I thought it was an encouraging performance. Broken record. Good game that was close, and then it became a loss. I think that there is hope. I think that the Raptors are on the road right now. It's tough to win on the road when you're a young team. Role players play better at home. They make their shots more at home. They play off of the crowd better. And your stars kind of have to win you the game on the road. And unfortunately, the Toronto Raptors came up short in that department a little bit. Of course, Immanuel Quickley kind of took on that star role at the end of the game. And I think as a closer, he's going to be really important because he can generate 3-point looks outside the paint, which is very encouraging. But RJ Barrett had a pretty poor night, and the Raptors played good defense overall and came up short. It's unfortunate. It happens. They're on the road. Can't blame them too much, but I want to see them win one of these games. I want to see them pick up their first road game. I want to see them win one of these close matches where they are in a dogfight and they can finally get over the hump. That's what I want to see. It doesn't have to be every night. They had one against the Kings at home. I see the vision with the team. I like how they're playing. They need to clean certain things up. They need more consistent performances from the top players on the team, and they need their coach to make the correct decisions in crunch time. And then when those things start to happen, when players mature and know how to win games, that's what this is all about. They're learning how to win games. And right now they're learning the hard way. And really just from a volume standpoint, the amount of close games you're in, you're going to win one of them. You're going to win one of them, especially if the refs don't do what they've been doing the past couple of games. If you get a fair whistle and you keep executing and you keep being in these close games, eventually you will get the win. And you will do enough. You'll do what it takes to drag yourself over the finish line. It may not be pretty, but one of these days they are going to convert the close games that they're in into a win. And they will have perhaps the opportunity to do that tonight when they play the Los Angeles Lakers, mercifully at 9:30 at night. So it's kind of surprising that the Clippers are getting the game where they didn't have to adjust their schedule to account for East Coast viewers, and the Lakers did. But here we are. Thankfully, it's not going to be a super late night for me, and I'll be able to get you my thoughts on that game. But yeah, that's the video. What do you think about Immanuel Quickley's return? Were you impressed? Did he move the needle for the Raptors? Are they going to be able to close out a close game? Let me know here in the comments and also on Twitter, where you can reach me at Raps Report. I'm also on Blue Sky. Yes, the other kind of Twitter replacement. For those of you who are there, you can add me. I'm also Raps Report there as well. So please like the video and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. And as always, thanks for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.